Well, the impact of a father is huge, isn't it? Be it positively or negatively, the impact of a father means everything. If you don't have a father, the impact is huge. The impact of a good father is life-changing. If you've had the blessing of having a father who cares for you incredibly, who loves you incredibly, who cares for you with all of his might, your life will be changed because of it. And in our passage today, we get a glimpse, don't we, of a father caring for his son. And I was reading recently the life of John G. Paton. If you don't know who John Paton is, he was the missionary to Vanuatu, one of the first missionaries to the New Hebrides. And he wrote an autobiography and he reflected back upon a period of time when he was going towards the college to do his studies and his father walked him there. And I want to read this to you so you get the impact. You get the impact of what a father can do and what Solomon is trying to do for you and me, what God as our Father is doing for us. So John G. Paton wrote this. My dear father walked with me the first 6 miles of the way. So you can picture them, can't you? The two of them walking. He's going to Bible college. They're walking there together. His counsels and tears and heavenly conversation on that parting journey are fresh in my heart, as if it had been yesterday. And tears are on my cheeks as freely now as then, whenever my memory steals me away to the scene. For the last half mile or so, we walked on together in almost unbroken silence. My father, as was often his custom, carrying hat in hand, while his long, yellow, flowing hair streamed like a girl's down his shoulder. His lips kept moving in silent prayers for me. And his tears fell fast when our eyes met each other in looks for which all speech was vain. We halted on reaching the appointed parting place. He grasped my hand firmly for a minute of silence, and then solemnly and affectionately said, God bless you, my son. Your father's God prosper you and keep you from all evil. Paton goes on to say that he never forgot this. And obviously he doesn't. He's writing about it. And can you imagine his whole life has been impacted by that love and that care and that concern and that passion to see his son following the Lord. And this is what Solomon is doing for his son. Now, it's possible in Proverbs 1, Solomon's not talking to his son. He's talking to other scholars. It was very normal for them to call them sons and the scholars to call their teachers father. But it means little. The point is, here is Solomon as the father figure coming, like Mr. Paton's father, to spur on his son, to warn his son, to guide his son, to protect his son from a deadly trap. I entitled my sermon, It's a Trap. If you get the Star Wars reference, kudos to you. But I called it It's a Trap because that's what sin is, isn't it? You think about Adam and Eve. The fruit looks good for eating, and it leads to death. And that's the story of sin, isn't it? Oh, how tantalizing it is. Oh, how lovely it looks. Has it not been your experience that you feel the temptation in your heart and everything feels so good and honorable and worthy? And when you give in, it gives birth to death instantly. It takes no more than 30 seconds before you're filled with remorse, before you regret your decision, before you're filled with frustration and disappointment and anger at yourself. Sin is like a deadly cancer. And if left unchecked, it will kill you. And Solomon recognized this. And so he reaches out to his son. He reaches out to his son to warn him of the enticement of sin. My son, he says in verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Now, either Solomon is picturing actual sinners, and there's a lot of hints towards the sort of a gang he's thinking of. And it was very common. But whether it's actual sinner or whether it's sin being portrayed as a group of sinners, it matters little. The implication is the same. And what I want us to notice is the way that sin entices us. The way that the sinner will entice us and the way sin entices us. So firstly, notice the invitation of sin. The invitation of sin. Firstly, it says in verse 11, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. It's the picture of violent robbery. It's lie in wait to pounce upon someone. Wait for some fresh meat to come along. And if he's thinking of the gang, you could imagine them, can't you? The gang of thieves hiding on a highway, on a byway, in a dark alley, waiting to pounce on a victim. But not only do we wait for blood, they say, let us ambush the innocent without reason. It's not just a violent robbery, it's an unjustified assault. There's no justification. They're not attacking someone who deserves it. Not that would be right, but you get my point. They're attacking the innocent. They're attacking the undefended. They're attacking the meek and the lowly and those deserving protection. The invitation continues. They say in verse 12, like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down to the pit. It's an invitation to thievery. It's an invitation to violence. It's an invitation to being unstoppable. That's the picture of Sheol, isn't it? The picture of death is unstoppable. Nothing stops death. It swallows people whole. And so they say, come and join us, and we can conquer anyone. We can take them all. We can kill them all. You see, ultimately, sin is portrayed here like a sinful gang offering an invitation to a young potential convert to their evil. And this is not a new thing, is it? Think about Sodom. Do you remember the story of Sodom and Lot? Now, we only get the back end of the story, don't we? When the whole mob of men turn up wanting to defile the visitors. But how do you think they got to a mob of men? It probably started with 2 or 3. 2 or 3 men walked along and they said, oh, hey, Lot's got some visitors. Let's go check them out. And 2 or 3 became 7, and 7 became 15, and 15 became 30. And as they invited all the men of town to come and join them in their revelry in sin and disgusting actions, everyone jumped on board. It's peer pressure. It works like a charm, doesn't it? Worked like a charm for me in school. Wonder if it worked like a charm for you. We see the same thing at play in the story of the Good Samaritan, don't we? The mob of men who assault the innocent man. And the same thing happens to us. The same thing happens in our heart, doesn't it? Maybe for you, you're not getting pressure to join a gang. Most of us aren't. But you feel the pressure to sin, don't you? Do you feel the pressure to sin? As you're going about your everyday life, maybe it's subtle. Maybe it's subtle ways. You see the woman standing on the corner. Maybe you don't think about doing anything violent or inappropriate. But you're tempted to think some pretty bad thoughts, aren't you? Maybe you don't commit robbery, but you're tempted to lie on the insurance form. You know, our heart, Calvin says, is an idol factory, constantly producing idols that we can worship. Our heart is so corrupt that it is filled with deceit and constantly seeking in and of itself, outside of Christ, is seeking to lead us to death and sin. There is this constant invitation. Isn't this true in your experience? As you go about life, just constantly, you just feel this barrage of temptations, sometimes stronger than others. And yes, they come and go, but it's always there, isn't it? Like Pilgrim on his journey, just constantly bumping in to temptation after temptation after temptation. We are like the apostle writes, James. If you've got your Bibles, turn to James. James 1. James 1 verse 14 and 15. He says, each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. See that pattern of where it goes? You're tempted when you're lured and enticed by your desires. You see, you desire things in your heart, don't you? You don't tell anyone about them, but you desire certain things in your heart. And so when you bump into one of those temptations, you'll get enticed into it. And like that gang calling out to this young man in Proverbs, your heart is calling out. And the devil is calling out to you. And we must shut our ears. Remember, there's a reason why the New Testament, Peter says, flee the devil. You know, we're foolish to think that we're strong enough to go to war against the devil. You don't stand a chance. You cannot stand up to the devil and his wiles and his temptations. You don't stand a chance. Your strength is not enough. With Christ, you can stand. But the New Testament says flee. Flee. When temptations arise, shut your ears, metaphorically speaking, as the devil and as your heart crave and entice you to sin. You must shut your ears and be like the little kid who sticks his hands on his ears and goes, no, 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 I'm not listening. You have to be like that. You have to fight. Do whatever you have to do. If your enticement's on your TV, throw it out. I remember speaking to a young man who said to me, I just really struggle with sin, and every time I open up my laptop, it's there, and I fall, and I fall, and I try, and I fall. I said to him, have you thought about throwing your laptop out? And he looked at me like I was insane. I said to him, throw your laptop out. Throw your phone out. Throw all your devices out. It's a lot harder to sin in that area if you haven't got any technology. You see, how seriously do we take sin? But notice, Notice not only this invitation of sin that comes forward, but notice also the motivation of sin. So the invitation of sin and the motivation of sin. Have a look at verse 13. We shall find all precious goods. We shall find riches. Hear the offer of sin, the offer of the sinner here, and the offer of sin. It comes along. Doesn't sin do this? It comes along and it says, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be great. You'll get rich. And not only will you get rich, you'll get plunder. They say we shall fill our houses with plunder. We'll fill up our homes. And not only will we fill up our homes, we'll have camaraderie. Have a look at verse 14. Throw in your lot among us. We'll all have one purse. This is sin, isn't it? Sin comes to us and says, look, we won't tell anyone. The devil says this. We won't tell anyone. Just you and my little secret. How often have you heard that story? The man gets tempted by the woman, and the devil says, don't worry, it's just this once. We won't tell anyone. Just enjoy the riches this once. Enjoy the plunder. And go home to your family. No one will know. You'll just be happier. Your wife won't be, you won't be as demanding upon your wife. Your wife will be happier. It'll be great. Everyone will get along just fine. Do you hear the seductiveness of that? The seductiveness of these men. Come on. We're going to get rich. They're rich, quick and easy. It's going to be great. We'll share everything together. Sounds a whole lot like Balaam. You remember the story of Balaam and Balak? Balak sends a message to Balaam and says, hey Balaam, come and curse Israel. Come and curse Israel. And then I'll bless you with all the riches of the earth. And Balaam, he goes and he prays to God. And God says, no, you can't go curse them because they're my people. You can't curse my people. They are blessed by me. And Balaam says, no. So Balak sends back him another message and he says, dude, I can give you up to half my kingdom. I'll give you everything. Just come and do it. And Balaam goes. Why? Because he wants earthly riches. The temptation for wealth and riches causes him to move out in rebellion against God. The allurement of sin is there at all times. You know, and Jesus says to us, store up riches in heaven. You see, this is the ridiculousness of sin. And it just blows my mind that I give into it. Because it offers me all these temporary pleasures, doesn't it? What does it offer me? It offers me wealth, it offers me sex, it offers me technology, it offers me laziness, it offers me fruitlessness, and I go, yes! Christ says, store up riches in heaven where the moth doesn't eat and the rust doesn't destroy and the thief doesn't break in and steal, and yet I give it all up for trash that gets stolen and destroyed. What's the problem? Well, the problem is we don't see the reality of sin. So notice not only the invitation and the motivation to sin, or the sinner offering those things, but notice the expectation of the sinner. Notice the expectation of sin, what they think is going to happen. Verse 15, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths. For their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain, hear this, verse 17 onwards, for in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the way of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessor. You see, sin offers and sinners offer all this amazing stuff. They offer success, they offer beauty, they offer joy, they offer happiness, they offer fruitfulness. And they offer it now. Come and get it now. It's right before you. Come and enjoy it. And so they set a trap, but they set it in vain. That's the picture of the bird, isn't it? You can picture yourself. Now, birds are stupid, so they don't actually think through it, but you can imagine it. You set the trap down for the bird and you throw the grain in there, and the bird's watching you. And almost like a cartoon, you can picture the bubble above the bird's head, and it's going, do you think I'm stupid? I'm not eating that grain. There's a trap there. And so these men, they're setting traps and they think they're getting wealthy, but they're actually getting nothing. And sin calls you to something beautiful in its eye. But it's not. They lie in wait for their own blood, he says. So they're lying in wait to capture someone. And remember they said, we're going to go out and get blood. We're going to go get the blood. And Solomon says, they're only going to capture their own. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They don't lie in wait for anybody else's. And they set an ambush for their own lives. So you pictured them. We pictured them, didn't we? They're sitting there waiting to pounce out and rob someone. But they're actually ambushing themselves. But not only are they ambushing themselves, everything they do takes away the life of its possessors. This is the picture of sin, my friend. Sin is no giver. Sin only takes. Sin only kills. Sin only destroys. As I said at the beginning, it's like a cancerous growth. And if left unchecked, it will go through your body and kill you. There's a reason John Owen said, we must kill sin or it will kill us. See, in all of this, you know the major problem for us. The major problem for us is we fail to recognize the truth of everything the New Testament is telling us. Think about Jesus. Think about the teaching of Jesus in Matthew, where he says, What does it profit a man? You can probably finish that, can't you? What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? What good is it if you give in to sin and gain everything and go to hell for it? Why will you keep toying with sin? You know, I find myself saying to people relatively frequently, sin will kill you. Sin will kill you. Now, it's not that you're going to lose your salvation. God's grace is far greater, far bigger than your sin. But if you perpetually give in to sin, your fruit will show that you were never saved to begin with. Sin is serious. It will kill you. It is a cancer. So, if sin is this serious, what's the hope? What do we do? Maybe you've given in to sin. Maybe you look at the world and all its enticements. You look at, maybe right now you're hearing the voice of sin crying out for you to give out. Maybe even now you're sitting on your computer and there's the temptation to click somewhere else and look at something better. And maybe you're thinking, why do I keep fighting? Why do I keep trying? What do? Turn to Psalm 73 for a second. We're going to turn to two passages very quickly and then we're going to close. Turn to Psalm 73. From verse 4. They have no pangs until death. This is the story of the wicked. Their bodies are fat and sleek. They are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Therefore pride is in their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes swell out through fatness. Their hearts overflow with follies. They scoff and speak with malice. Loftily they threaten oppression. They set their mouths against the heavens, and their tongue struts through the earth. Therefore his people turn back to them and find no fault in them. And they say, how can God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked, always at ease. They increase in riches. Have a look at verse 16. What's the outcome? But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task, until I went into the sanctuary of God and I discerned their end. You see, the psalmist saw the wicked prospering and calling the other people to come and join them in wickedness. And he says, what's the point? He's tempted to say, what is the point? Why don't I just give in to sin? It works for them. And then he goes into the house of God and he recognizes what? The final destiny of the wicked and the righteous. And this is where we run into Colossians 3. Colossians chapter 3. Why should you keep striving? Why should you put sin to death? Appear with him in glory. And so just picture it for a second. You've died with Jesus. You've gone to glory with Jesus. You've been raised with Jesus. You're seated with him in the heavenly realms. You're united to him for eternity. Therefore, verse 5, put to death. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. You see, what Solomon found out, what Solomon knew and didn't listen to, was that God is far more glorious than sin. God has more to offer and is more beautiful and more lovely than sin. Solomon failed at the end, didn't he? He gave in to sin. And I guess the question for you and I is, will we? You see, Christ has paid the price. He's won us. He's paid for our sin. Will we go like a dog to our vomit and return to the sin which cost Christ his life? Will we knowingly go to that which required him to be beaten, tortured, and crucified? Or will we, as younger brothers, put to death the deeds of the flesh and live in keeping with the Spirit of God, as Romans 8 tells us to? My dear friends, we have Christ. Why would we want sin? That would be like the younger brother and the prodigal son. After being welcomed back by the father, it would be like him taking the ring off his finger and going back to the pig stalls. Well, let me ask you, are you tempted to go to the pig stalls? Or will you stay in the house and celebrate with your big brother Jesus Christ? Amen. Let's pray.